The night shift at the Grand Crest Hotel was supposed to be quiet. That's what they told me. A dead-end job for a dead-end town. The building had stood on that corner for over 80 years, and most of its guests had long since found better places to stay. I clocked in at 11, nodded to the day manager as he grabbed his coat, and settled into the creaking chair behind the front desk. The lobby smelled of old carpet and bleach, a combination that never quite masked the underlying mustiness. The phones were silent. The doors were locked. I was alone. At midnight, I decided to do a walkthrough. Standard procedure, they said. Check the floors, make sure nothing's out of place. I took the master key and stepped into the east wing. The corridor stretched before me like a throat. Doors on either side, all closed. The carpet muffled my footsteps until I couldn't hear myself walking. I passed room 204, then 206. The numbers seemed to blur together. I stopped at 208. The door was slightly ajar. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as I leaned closer. The door wasn't supposed to be open. All rooms were vacant tonight. I pushed it gently, and it swung inward without a sound. The room was dark, but the streetlight outside filtered through the curtains, casting pale stripes across the bed. The sheets were undisturbed. The air was cold. And on the nightstand, a single photograph faced the door. I picked up the photograph. It was old, sepia-toned, the edges curled. A man stood in the center, dressed in a suit from decades past. His face was oddly dark, as if the light had refused to touch it. Behind him, I could see the same wallpaper, the same curtains, the same bed frame. This room. But the man's posture was wrong. His arms hung too straight. His head tilted at an angle that made my stomach turn. I put the photograph back and stepped out of the room. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was nothing. A guest left it behind. A prank. But as I walked back toward the lobby, I felt something change. The air grew heavier. The silence deepened. And I started to hear a sound. Faint. Rhythmic. Coming from somewhere above me. A dripping. Or footsteps. Or something in between. The sound came from the third floor. I took the stairs one at a time, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. The banister was cold under my hand. The steps groaned beneath my weight. I reached the landing and stopped. The hallway stretched ahead, identical to the one below, but darker. The bulbs were out. Only the emergency exit sign cast a red glow, painting the walls the color of dried blood. I saw it then. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Not ajar like the first one. Wide open. The room beyond was black, an absolute absence of light. I called out. Hello? My voice sounded wrong, flattened by the dead air. No answer. But the dripping sound continued. Steady. Deliberate. Coming from inside that room. I reached for the light switch. My fingers found it, and I flicked it up. Nothing. The bulb was dead. But the dripping sound stopped. I stood there, frozen, my hand still on the switch. The silence was worse. It pressed against my ears. And then I heard something else. A whisper. Very soft. Coming from the darkness just inches from my face. I ran. I don't remember turning. I don't remember the stairs. I only remember the sound of my own breathing, ragged and too loud, and the feeling that something was following me. Not chasing. Following. At the same pace. The same rhythm. When I reached the lobby, I locked myself in the back office and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The clock on the desk read 1:17 a.m. I stayed there for what felt like hours. The phone on the desk had no signal. The radio only spat static. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion. The late hours. The isolation. People see things when they're tired. But I knew that wasn't true. I knew what I saw. And I knew what I heard. The whisper had said my name. At 2:30, I forced myself to go back to the front desk. I couldn't stay in that office forever. The lobby looked the same. Empty. Quiet. But something was different. The photograph. The one from room 208. It was lying on the counter, face up. I hadn't brought it with me. I hadn't touched it since I left the room. But there it was, staring at me from across the polished wood. The man in the photograph had moved. I know that sounds insane. But his head was turned now. In the first picture, he faced forward. Now he faced the left. Toward the door. Toward the hallway I had just come from. I flipped the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting that looked like scratches, was a date. Tomorrow's date. I don't know why I went back upstairs. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I needed to understand. But I walked the east wing again, and this time, I counted the doors. 201, 203, 205, 207. Then 209. Room 208 was gone. The door was still there, but the number plate was missing. In its place was a fresh coat of paint, still wet. I touched the paint. It was cold. And wet. It came off on my fingers like blood. I wiped it on my pants and tried the door. Locked. I used the master key. It didn't fit. The lock was different, older, a skeleton key mechanism I hadn't seen before. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. Then, very faintly, the sound of someone breathing on the other side. I stepped back. The breathing stopped. The lights above me flickered once, then died. I stood in total darkness, the only sound my own heartbeat. And then I felt it. A hand. Cold. Pressing against the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The corridor was empty. But the hand was still there. I could feel the impression of fingers on my skin. I ran to the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached the ground floor. My neck was cold where the hand had touched me. I checked it in the bathroom mirror. There was a mark. 5 pale lines, like fingerprints, pressed into my skin. They were ice cold to the touch. And they were spreading. I saw him in the mirror. Behind me. A man in a dark suit, his face still obscured by shadow. He stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides. I turned. No one was there. But when I looked back at the mirror, he was closer. His head tilted. And I heard that whisper again, clear as day. You shouldn't have come here. I shattered the mirror. I don't remember picking up the trash can. I don't remember swinging it. But the glass exploded, and the figure vanished. I stood there, breathing hard, shards at my feet. The pieces of the mirror lay scattered on the floor, and in each one, I saw him. Dozens of reflections. All watching me. All smiling. I fled the bathroom. I grabbed my coat and headed for the front door. I didn't care about the job anymore. I didn't care about anything. I just wanted out. But the front door wouldn't open. The lock was jammed. The handle wouldn't turn. I pulled and pulled, but it was sealed. And through the glass, I saw the street outside. Empty. Dark. And wrong. The street was gone. Not empty. Gone. There was no road. No buildings across the street. Just a void. An endless, silent blackness where the world should have been. The hotel was floating in nothing. I stumbled backward, away from the door, and the lights in the lobby went out. All of them. I was alone in the dark. I found a flashlight in the desk drawer. The beam cut through the darkness, but it only made things worse. Every corner it touched revealed something. A chair that wasn't there before. A door that led to nowhere. And in the far corner of the lobby, a figure. The man in the suit. He was facing the wall, his head bowed, his hands clasped behind his back. I aimed the light at him. He didn't move. I took a step forward. He didn't react. I called out. "Who are you?" Slowly, he turned. His face was still dark, but I could see it now. It wasn't shadow. It was a void. A perfect, flat black where his features should have been. And he spoke without a mouth. "You've been here before." The words hit me like a physical force. I remembered. Not clearly. Not fully. But in fragments. A desk. A photograph. A date. I had worked this shift before. Many times. But I never left. I always ended up here, in the lobby, with him. The hotel wasn't empty. I was the only guest. And I had been here for a very long time. I sat down. I couldn't run anymore. The figure stood over me, his void face staring down. I asked him what he wanted. He said nothing. He simply raised his hand and pointed. I followed his gesture. On the wall behind the front desk, there was a new photograph. It was me. Sitting on this floor. In this exact position. And the date on the frame was today's date. I am still here. The hotel is still empty. The photograph is still on the wall. Sometimes, I hear the night shift worker arrive. I hear him walk the corridors. I hear him find the picture in room 208. And I know that soon, he will be here with me. The walls are thin. The doors are locked. And the man in the suit is always watching. Waiting for the next guest to check in.